We're working with arrays, and in JavaScript, arrays are objects. Now that's one of those words that sounds very generic, but it has a meaning in programming. And we're going to get into what objects are, but for now it just means they're more than dumb containers of data. Arrays are smart. They can tell us information about themselves. And they have behavior. They can actually do things if we ask them to. Well, what do I mean by that? We've kind of seen some of this already. Let's say I create a variable that's just a string. Well, we've seen that we can use the .length property of that string variable to find information about the string. In this case, it would pop up the length of it being 24. I didn't have to go and count all the letters. The string itself actually knew what its length was. And we can use that same kind of format to find information about arrays. Let's say I use the shorthand format to create an array here with 5 elements ranging from position 0 through position 4. I could do something very similar that I did with the string and call myArray.length. In this case, it will pop up an alert box with the number 5. Now, that's an important idea here. It knows its length is 5. That is the length of the entire array. There are 5 elements in it, although bear in mind the highest index is 4. 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. But we're using the same .length property. It's smart enough to know that when we say .length on a string, it's how many characters are in the string. When we say .length on an array, it's what's the length of the array. Now, we've already seen how we use functions in JavaScript. We use the name of the function with the opening and closing parentheses. You can create them yourself. We can also use the built-in functions like alert. In this case, I'm passing in information into that function. Or I can call a function passing in information that also returns a value. So functions are used all over the place. Well, we also have the idea of methods. And they're very, very similar, but a method is a function that belongs to an object. So instead of calling it directly, we actually use the name of the object, then a dot, then the name of the method. And when I say some method here with the opening and closing parentheses, it's very much like calling a function. But we have to say, what does this method apply to? What am I doing it on? And we've seen this before. If we have a string variable, we can use the .toUpperCase method to actually convert that to uppercase. And we have several very useful ones with arrays. So I can create multiple arrays and then call the different methods on each array. So let's say I use the shorthand format here. I'm creating a new array and just putting some random stuff in it. I've got an array with 5 elements. What I can then do is say myArray.reverse. I'm using the opening and closing parentheses, but I don't need to pass anything in. That will reverse all the elements of the array in place. 50 had been at position 4. It's now at position 0, and so on. We have other methods like .sort that will sort them according to the rules of JavaScript sorting, if it's all alphabetical or all numeric or a mixture of the two. We have .join that will take all the elements of the array and combine them with commas and return them as a string. We have useful little methods like .pop. If I call .pop on my array, it's going to take the last element, what's currently in there at position 4, and detach it and return that as a value. So we can pop something off the end of the array. Now, the flip side of that, we also have .push. In this case, I have to push a value onto the array, and it will push it to the last element of the array. So these arrays are smart. They can tell us information. They have behavior. We can actually get to different pieces of them. And there is more that an array can do. Now, one of the questions you might have is when you're learning programming, you might be thinking, am I supposed to remember all this? Well, no, at least not initially. You'll find that you will memorize the things that you use, but no programmer tries to memorize every single method on every single object. There are just too many. So the kind of thing that you do is you find a reference guide. Now, with JavaScript, I'm a big fan of the reference guide you can find at mozilla.org. These are really the people that own JavaScript, so it's a good example. We jump into that reference guide, and what I'll find is it breaks down all the different objects that are available, like array. I could go in and find some information about the array. It will give me a lot of descriptive stuff, but what I'll find in the table of contents is there'll be a section that says properties, things like length, or methods. And I could jump down to methods, and it would actually tell me, as I start to scroll down here, I've got the pop method, which removes the last element from an array and returns that element. I've got the push method that will add one or more elements to the end of the array. I've got sort, I've got splice. And this is the way that you start navigating the language. You find a reference guide for the language that you're working with, and you start to explore the different pieces of the language as and when you need them. Don't try and memorize everything, because that's just not going to work. Just know where you can find the reference of the syntax. The ability to find what you need to in a reference guide is much more powerful than trying to memorize everything.